When it comes to NFL content here on YouTube, draft grades are far from a unique concept, right? I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here with this series. We pretty much know what it's going to be. But that being said, typically when you see these videos, you get one of four flavors. You'll get somebody who will just talk about the things they liked about the draft, talk about their favorite draft classes. Maybe they'll throw in their least favorite draft classes, but they won't cover the draft in its entirety. Or you'll have somebody who will go division by division, make 8 videos talking about every single NFL division and what those teams in those different divisions did during the draft. You might have somebody who focuses on one specific team. Maybe they have a channel dedicated to that team and they only talk about the picks that that team made. Or you might have somebody who just throws it all in one video, talks for an hour, hour and a half, and that's how they cover the draft in its entirety. And all of that is fine and dandy. No hate to anyone who takes that approach with this content. But for me personally, I kind of hate myself. And also, I'm really disappointed in the pre-draft content I made. I didn't make nearly as much as I wanted to. So to kind of punish myself and also to try to stand out a little bit, we are going to be talking about all 32 teams in depth in 32 different videos. The original plan was to do that throughout the month of May. Obviously, we're in June now. I missed that deadline. So hopefully we'll be able to get it done by June. And if I can't get it done by the end of June, then we'll make another little intro video and I'll talk about how we're going to do it through May, June, and July. We'll just have to see how our schedule shakes out. So before we jump into it, I would like to give a quick disclaimer because this is the #1 type of comment I get on these videos. I would like to point out, I don't think I'm better than any NFL GMs out there. I am an amateur. I am somebody who has a little bit of free time and spends that free time studying the game and scouting college players. I'm not a professional. If you think your favorite GM knows more about football than I do, you're probably right and I won't fault you for that. I'm not trying to say that I know more than any of these GMs I'm critiquing. I'm simply providing analysis based off of my analysis of different draft prospects and also talking about maybe what I would have done differently if I was in their shoes. It's a fun exercise. It's a great way to talk about some guys that I probably wouldn't have talked about otherwise. And if you think this is me trying to say I'm better than X GM, you are absolutely wrong. This video is going to be something a little bit different from me. Because if you know me, you know I don't necessarily like to say the nicest things about the New Orleans Saints, right? I'm not a huge fan of the franchise. I'm not a huge fan of the direction they're heading. Not a huge fan of their owner. There's a lot of things I could say I don't like about the Saints, but one thing I can say I absolutely love about the Saints is their 2024 draft class, because they absolutely killed it, and that starts out with the offensive tackle out of Oregon State, Talise Fuanga, who is an absolute stud. I love Fuanga. He was one of my favorite players in this class. I had a top 20 grade on him. Take him at 14. I thought he was the best offensive tackle available at this point. Obviously, you see Joe Alt, J.C. Latham, and Olu Fashanu all taken over him. I had Fuanga and Troy Fotanu very similarly graded. And Fuanga I like more just based off my own personal preferences. Like I said, talent-wise, they're very close. But based on preference, based on what I like in a lineman, Fuanga has it. He is a tough mauler of an offensive tackle who loves to just kill people that line up across from him. You know, massive frame, massive anchor, or fantastic anchor rather, because of his massive frame is the better way to put that. Fantastic play strength, which allows him to toss guys around with ease. Nasty, tenacious demeanor. He smells blood in the water every single snap. Excellent first step relative to his frame. Obviously, you're not going to confuse him with some of the lighter, quicker tackles, but in terms of, you know, somebody who's 6'6", 324 pounds, he's pretty quick off the ball. Good explosiveness, covers more ground than you'd expect, both laterally and vertically as a run blocker. Punches hit hard. He's got long arms, patient as a pass blocker, really good balance. He's smooth, he's instinctive. He's able to quickly work to the second level and erase linebackers as a run blocker. Like, there is a lot to like about Fuanga. Now, sure, his pad level isn't the most consistent thing in the world. He needs a little bit of refinement in his footwork. And there are going to be times where he will get a little too aggressive. You know, it's almost like when he sees a linebacker, he's like a bull seeing red, and he's just running. And if you get one of these quicker linebackers lined up, you know, say a Roquan Smith, I know he's not in your division, you're only going to play him once every 4 years, but just the first one that comes to mind, right? One of the league's better linebackers, very athletic, very quick. there's probably going to be times where a guy like that can move out of Fuanga's way and he's going to be left hitting a whole lot of air. So, you do have to take that into consideration. But in terms of what he provides as a player, he's fantastic. Reminds me a lot of one of my favorite players that I've ever evaluated in Darnell Wright, who did get drafted by my Chicago Bears last year. I thought he was the best offensive tackle in the class. And if you watched Fuanga talk at the Combine, he studied a lot of Darnell Wright. He's a big fan of Darnell Wright. And that absolutely shows. They're just these massive, physical, mean right tackles that, play a lot better than you'd expect with quickness and with their pass blocking. Now, one thing I will say is I am a little concerned about him kicking to left tackle. Not because I don't think he can do it. I think he can. It's just the idea of I hate to see any rookie tackle get drafted and then immediately have to get flipped, because that's not an easy thing to do. Tristan Wirfs has talked about it because he switched from right tackle to left tackle after Brady retired. For the last couple years, he's been a left tackle. And granted, he has done absolutely fantastic with that transition, but he'll tell you it's like learning how to walk again. It's incredibly, incredibly tough to learn how to mirror everything. So that doesn't impact the grade at all. I still think this is an A+ pick. I think this is the perfect thing for what they needed at 14. It's just not ideal. And I know the Saints offensive line is far from ideal as a whole. Obviously, when you have Trevor Penning starting and Ryan Ramczyk out for the year, you're in a tough spot. So we'll have to see what happens. I honestly was hoping when they drafted Fuanga that the plan was to play him at guard. I could absolutely see him as like a fantastic guard. But I understand playing him a tackle. I understand the vision completely. So we'll have to see how that works out. I think he will be fine. I think there will be some lumps. I think there will be some growing pains, but what rookie doesn't have growing pains, especially with offensive linemen? Like Darnell Wright, for example, you look last year, at the start of the year, he struggled a little bit. Then, he played against Max Crosby with a bum shoulder and won pretty much every rep, right? You have your ups and your downs with a rookie. I think Fuanga will be fine. I think he'll be an impact player on the line. And for Derek Carr's sake, I think he will do everything he can to keep him upright. As we jump over to the other side of the ball here in the second round, they take Kool-Aid McKinstry, the corner out of Alabama. In my opinion, the best Alabama corner in this draft. And McKinstry is another player who I gave a Bears comp to when I did my pre-draft analysis. Reminds me a lot of Jalen Johnson. And if you watched the Bears last year, you will know Jalen Johnson was the best corner in football, not named Ahmad Gardner. He was absolutely incredible. And what they have in common is they are super instinctive, super smart, super sticky corners that excel in man coverage. Jalen Johnson's quite a bit better in zone coverage than Kool-Aid. Granted, he's been in the league for going on 5 years now. Kool-Aid's a rookie, so you hope to see that development, obviously. I'm not old enough to remember Jalen Johnson coming out of Utah, or I'm old enough to remember it. I'm not old enough to have really known what I was doing when scouting, right? In 2020, I would have been 17, and at that point in my life, I was more focused on musical theater, because that's what I did in high school. So, I wasn't exactly the world's best scout at the time, so I couldn't tell you how similar they were coming out. But in terms of the type of player we're talking about, somebody who, is just really smart, really physical, really sticky in man coverage, and you consider the Saints' other corners, you've got a guy like Alontae Taylor, you've got Paulson Adebo, you've got Marshawn Lattimore. These guys are all also really good in man coverage. They're really sticky. They're really athletic, especially in the cases of Adebo and Taylor, who are some of the faster corners in the league. Kool-Aid's going to fit in perfectly in the secondary, right? This isn't a team that's going to run a ton of zone. This isn't a team that is going to ask Kool-Aid to do much else other than erase the guy across from him, and I think he's absolutely capable of doing that. He's physical at the line of scrimmage, good press coverer. That's not a word that I just used. He is good in press coverage, is what I am trying to say, if that is not apparent. But either way, I'm really excited to see him fit in New Orleans. Like I said, he was my favorite corner out of Alabama. I know everyone loved Terry and Arnold. I just thought because McKinstry was a little bit better on the outside, a little bit more physical, a little bit stickier in man coverage. He was better. Arnold has the higher upside because he is the more athletic player. That's kind of the big gripe with Kool-Aid, is he's not the quickest, the most athletic player in the world. But what he lacks in athleticism, he makes up for in physicality and instinct. So very, very exciting stuff for the Saints. Building up a really scary secondary. I was shocked he was in the second round, which is why I gave him an A+ here. I thought he was worth at least a mid-first round pick. Taking a look at my big board, I had him not too far off from Furwanga. I had him as my 21st player. So love that pick. And then we get into the 5th round. We do quite a jump. They take Spencer Rattler, the quarterback out of South Carolina. And, you know, Spencer, he's got a bad rep, right? You know, if it's not apparent, I'm a Bears fan, so I know all the stories of him getting pulled for Caleb and Caleb leading the big comeback at Oklahoma, and, you know, that kind of starting to be the beginning of the end for Spencer. And then you've got all the stuff that happened with I forget what show it was, but where he basically came off as a total douchebag and a complete diva. I get it. You know, I get why people didn't like him as much. I get why he fell. You have kind of the question of the maturity. He's not a refined quarterback by any means, but he's had kind of a Bo Nix-esque development where he went from this kind of loose cannon, crazy improviser who just kind of did his own thing to a bit more refined, a bit better of a pocket passer. Now, Bo Nix took that to the extreme, right? Bo Nix went from like prime Russell Wilson in terms of how much he liked to improvise, not saying he was as good, just in terms of how much he did it, to like a true pocket passer, right? Like a true field general pocket passer. Spencer Rattler went from a psycho improviser to a gunslinger, kind of, who knows how to sit in the pocket, but you can tell deep down he still wants to be doing that crazy stuff. Reminds me a lot of Baker Mayfield in that regard, right? We've seen Baker bounce around the league, finally found his home in Tampa last year, looked great. Obviously, Saints fans very familiar with that. And, you know, when you're looking at Spencer Rattler as a player, I think there's a lot to like. So looking at my scouting report here, going through the strengths, quick, snappy release, arm talent is near elite, allows him to generate velocity with the flick of his wrist, able to layer that velocity with touch on throws downfield, understands leverage at an above average level when it comes to, you know, throwing the ball to receivers downfield, elite play extender thanks to short area agility and evasiveness and creativity, incredibly smooth when forced to make off-platform throws, eyes remain downfield when the play breaks down, he's forced out of the pocket. You know, he's not somebody that as soon as he gets pressure, he's tucking and running. He's going to move out of the pocket and run around and try to find something open downfield. He's willing to hang in the pocket and take hits while delivering throws downfield. While he's not an elite athlete in open space, he is somebody that is more than capable of picking up yards with his legs, and he's a very tough runner. Now, on the flip side of things, you know, we talked about kind of some of the red flags. He's not an elite runner. You know, he's not Lamar Jackson. He's nothing like that. He's a lot more of like a Baker Mayfield. Again, I love that comparison for myself personally. He struggles versus the blitz at times. He's going to become jittery. He's going to become anxious. He is going to flush himself out of clean pockets when he sees blitzes coming. But again, he's not going to try to run with the ball. He's going to try to put the ball somewhere downfield. Those jitters will cause him to abandon footwork and attempt throws from all sorts of wonky angles and stances. Internal clock isn't great. There's lapses and sensing pressure on his backside. And there are going to be times where, you know, he kind of forces those throws downfield, tries to make something out of nothing, and it doesn't exactly work. Plus, he's going to be 24 years old in September. So not somebody that has, you know, the grace of like a JJ McCarthy to sit for 2, 3, 4 years and, you know, develop, right? Rattler's somebody that's kind of like, you know, we're getting him in, we'll give him a year or two, but by the time Derek's contract's up, you either need to be ready or we're looking elsewhere, right? And that makes it kind of tough. I do think there's still quite a bit of room to grow with Rattler, but I like this pick a lot. I thought Rattler was worth like a second round pick. I'll put it this way. This will get you Saints fans excited. I had a higher grade on him than I had on Michael Penix. I did not like Michael Penix at all. We'll talk about him when I get to the Falcons, but I just didn't think he was very good at football. I thought Rattler was a better player. So I think there's potential there. I think he's somebody that, you know, with the right development, with the right coaching, which I can't remember the offensive coordinator's name that y'all just brought in, but the guy that came over, he's a Shanahan guy. Oh, I'm blanking so hard. I gotta look this up. This is gonna kill me. You'd think I'd have this ready, right? Clint Kubiak, goodness. If Kubiak can kind of work with him, get some of that development going, I think Rattler can be a Baker Mayfield type player, where maybe he's never a superstar, but I think you can get some fun plays out of him, win some games with him, and maybe if you get a good team around him, you know, you can see what happens. But I like the Rattler pick a lot for the Saints, especially given the situation with Derek Carr. But then just 20 picks later, I like this pick a lot less, and that is the wide receiver Bub Means out of Pittsburgh. And look, I'll put it to you this way. I watched 35 receivers this year. He was my 34th ranked. Means is, to me, somebody that I can see the upside. You know, he's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the length. He can stretch the field with that speed. He's not afraid to get physical. He has pretty okay foot quickness that allows him to beat press inconsistently. There's glimpses of tempo variation and patience before breaking in on routes. He attacks the ball with strong hands and frosty at the catch point. I'm just straight up reading off my my draft grades, or my draft evaluations here, my draft board, which is public. If you want to see it, I'll leave a link in the description to it. But he's just somebody that doesn't have a lot of refinement. You know, he is somebody that it almost looks like when you're watching him, he's more concerned with getting to where he needs to be than he is with creating separation in route. You know what I mean? Like when you're running a route, there is a certain point of the field that you're trying to get to. And it seems like he's more worried about that than he is about actually separating from the DB covering him while getting there, which is kind of the main point. You know, hand usage when facing press coverage isn't great. Balance isn't great. You'd like to see his hands be a little bit better in like contested catch situations. Not super creative after the catch. Not a good blocker. He's somebody that you look at A.T. Perry. This is like the perfect A.T. Perry backup. And while I see a role for that, I see a world where he makes the roster, which is why I gave this a C+ and not like an F. You look at some of the other receivers available. You know, Johnny Wilson can absolutely do that. Brendan Rice can do that. Ryan Flournoy can do that. I had higher grades on all of them. Some other players that would give you something a little bit different. Malik Washington, Taj Washington, Cornelius Johnson. He's actually somebody that can also do what Bub Means is doing. Jaquan Jackson out of Tulane. Like, there were better receivers on the board at this point in the draft, which is where my biggest complaints lie with this. I understand wanting a receiver. It was a very deep class. I just think they went with the wrong one. All right, we'll have to see how it pans out for him. But me personally, not a huge fan of the player, not a huge fan of the pick. But they did turn it around 5 picks later. They take Jalen Ford, the linebacker out of Texas. This is a pick I do like quite a bit. At a late third to an early 4th round grade on Ford, excuse me. Great value there. He was my 8th ranked linebacker. And look, if you want somebody that's going to come into this linebacker core, and I don't want to get too optimistic here, but maybe be a Demario Davis replacement. At worst, be somebody that can just play alongside Pete Werner down the line, then you're feeling pretty good about Jalen Ford doing that. Super intelligent linebacker. Reminds me a lot of like a prime Alec Ogletree, which prime Alec Ogletree was a dog. All right, don't get it twisted. So he's got the size, he's got the play strength, he's got good enough speed to shoot downhill. He's got fluid hips, good spatial awareness, good pad level. He's aggressive and smart when it comes to shooting gaps. He can stack and shed pretty effectively. He sets a mean edge. He rarely falls for play action. He reads quarterbacks well in coverage. He does a great job of passing off routes, and communicating in zone coverage. Not the most athletic guy in the world. There's going to be times where he gets outran to like the sideline by some of these faster running backs. He's not great at guarding running backs out of the backfield, like man coverage. And he's not the most consistent tackler. It's more of like a, how do I want to put this? More of like a hesitancy thing. Like it's almost like he doesn't trust his eyes, even though he's reading it correctly. So I say a Demario Davis replacement, obviously very different types of player. right? Demario Davis has always been this super smart, super athletic coverage guy. Jalen Ford isn't quite that, but he is somebody that I would absolutely trust taking command of a defense. He's somebody that, 3-4 years down the line, I could see as a really solid Mike in this league, with obviously Pete Werner as his kind of partner in crime, or maybe he's more of the partner in crime to Pete Werner, however you want to kind of twist it. I can see that being a very, very nice duo. So not only just looking at the value here of getting a guy that I thought was worth a 3rd round pick, maybe a 4th round pick in the 5th round, you're also getting a player I just thought was really good, was a big fan of. This is a great pick. Very, very high on this pick for the Saints. I don't know how much PT he'll get right away, because obviously you have Demario Davis and Pete Werner, and you signed Willie Gay in free agency, but he's only on a 1-year deal. Demario Davis is not getting any younger. We'll have to see what the path to getting on the field for Jalen Ford is, but he's someone that I'm definitely going to be watching with, optimism, excitement. I think he can be very, very good at what he does. But moving on from that, into the 6th round at pick 199, you take Christian Boyd, the University of Northern Iowa defensive tackle. And I like this pick a lot, first of all, because of the value. Had an early 5th round grade on him. You take him here in the 6th round, that's fantastic value in my eyes. And second of all, he reminds me a lot of a player that is currently on the Saints, and Kalen Saunders. Somebody who is built like a nose tackle, has the ability to play nose tackle, but can kind of get out there and move, can kind of do a little bit in the pass game. Like, obviously, he's got all the stuff you want from a nose tackle. Compact build, stout anchor, strong arms, hands are like hammers when he hits people, natural leverage because he's a little bit on the shorter side at 6'2", legitimate space heater, fantastic at 2-gapping, violent when it comes to stacking and shedding blocks. But the exciting thing here, on top of all of that, because there weren't a lot of truly great nose tackles in this class, I think Christian Boyd was one of the better ones. On top of that, you've got a surprising first step. I mean, he gets off the ball a lot quicker than you'd expect for somebody who is 320 pounds. He can push the pocket as a pass rusher from time to time. He flashes the ability to use swipe and chop moves, not necessarily consistently, but enough where you can be like, oh, okay, let's work with that. Let's send him to go work with Kalen. Let's get them together in the lab working. Let's get them to work with the defensive line coach and see if we can't make this happen more consistently. Because if you can do that, Christian Boyd can be a stud. Now, unfortunately, as a nose tackle, not a great athlete. There's going to be times where he's going to struggle to see over blockers and into the backfield because he is only 6'2". Obviously, you worry about him transitioning to the league from lack of, or how do I want to put this? Dealing with lesser competition at the University of Northern Iowa. And then obviously, too, you have the pass rushing kind of being a projection. But it's exciting. I think he's a fun player. I think he's somebody that can make a really, really interesting impact on this team. Not right now, but down the road a little bit. So I think it's a great pick, A+ there. And then finally, the only player in this class who I wasn't super familiar with coming into it, that is Josiah Ezram, I believe is how you pronounce his name. I could be wrong. But I went back, watched a little bit of his tape out of the University of Eastern Kentucky. And you know what? He's fine. He's got the frame. He's got enough lateral quickness. He can get to the second level in the run game. He's a solid athlete. He's just, raw. Body control isn't great. Pad control isn't great. Technique needs work. Core strength needs work. He leans a little bit. But in the 7th round, taking a flyer on a tackle with the physical traits, you can't get upset with that. So obviously got to give him an A there for good process. Not going to say an A+, because there were tackles on the board that I still liked. But it is what it is, right? So as a whole, I think the Saints did pretty damn good. I already told you up front, I don't like to say nice things about the Saints very often, but I think they outdid themselves this year. The Bub Means pick isn't one that I loved. I do understand the thought process behind it at least, so it's not one that I can sit here and say, this is a waste of a pick, you fucked up. Plus, it's the 5th round at the end of the day, right? So, with all that being said, I'm going to give them an A. Not the perfect draft. I do think there's there were classes that were worthy of an A+ where our team just straight up didn't miss on any picks. And I do think to a certain extent the Means pick is a bit of a miss. plus the lack of picks in the 3rd and 4th round kind of hurts the grade a little bit. But an A is damn respectable. I thought they had the best draft in this division. Actually, I think grade-wise they might have tied with Carolina, but I do lean towards liking theirs a little bit more, for being totally honest. I'm just double-checking myself here. I think I also gave Carolina an A, if I'm not mistaken. I did. Yeah, so these two tied for the highest grade in the division, but I do like the Saints grade a little bit more. There's a grade between an A and an A+. I think that's where the Saints would reside. But either way, not a lot to be excited about for the Saints on the field this year. Unfortunately, I don't think this is a team that's going to win a lot of games. I don't think this is a team that's going to find a lot of success. But there's some exciting young pieces in the building, alongside some of the already existing exciting young pieces in the building. So I think the future is bright for the Saints. Just got to hope everything develops the way you want it to. And I think guys like Fuwanga, McKinstry, Ford, Boyd, and maybe even Rattler can absolutely be guys that make you excited to look towards the future if you are a fan of the New Orleans Saints.
Had a chance on the throwback.
This was an ill-advised throw. What an unbelievable catch by Cole Kmet. And he cups it too. No movement when he hits the ground, tucked up against his shoulder. Wow.
Using that